Pearl of Africa, History, Politics. Idi Amin, untreated syphilis, or batshit crazy. Yoweri Museveni and his son Muhoozi, who mirrors Amin. Uganda is what could have been the greatest African empire. Saturday, January 21, 2023. By T.B. Obwoj. Idi Amin was no doubt a dictator. He's labeled one of the worst dictators in history. The world failed Ugandans when they refused to curb his antics and brutal behavior while they had the chance. The United States of America was the only country to place sanctions on Uganda under Idi Amin's rule. Here I will try to pull together several historical versions of the political life of Idi Amin and his brutality that killed an unknown number of Ugandans. Anywhere from 300,000 to 800,000 people were killed during the 8 years of the reign of Amin in Uganda. To this day, Idi Amin's behavior has been studied by many psychologists. As he started to behave oddly, some claimed he had untreated syphilis. Others say he had bipolar disorder, or that he was created as a result of the abuse of British colonizers. Idi Amin's childhood and early life are very difficult to piece together even after reading several sources and watching hours of videos. Here I'll try to map out the beginning of Amin's life. He was born and named Idi Amin Dada Umi in 1924 or 1925. The British had been ruling the country since 1894. Side note, Dada Amin's sister in Kiswahili, which wasn't made the official language in Uganda until 2022. Amin was raised in extreme poverty. His mother was a talented herbalist. Some sources claim she was a witch, in the northwestern region of Uganda. Other sources claim she treated the royal family of the Buganda tribe, a family which goes back to the 14th century. Idi Amin might also have been from the southern portion of what is modern-day South Sudan. Idi was also a Muslim, which was the popular religion of people living in that area of the country called Koboko. Muslims only made up about 6 to 7% of Uganda. His father is said to have been of the Kakwa tribe and his mother of the Lugbara tribe. Ugandans and British disliked and discounted Ugandans from that area. They were often employed as soldiers, police officers and prison guards, called idiots but used for their brute strength. White historians called him illiterate, uneducated and idiot, which proves to be untrue once we get further into his life. Amin didn't speak English in his younger years without any proper schooling. His mother wanted him to attend a British school which the Brits didn't allow. It was only for the children of British officers. Idi was a tall, very large man, marked at around 6 feet 4 inches and over 240 pounds. Despite his size, he was very athletic, even called quick on his feet. The British loved Uganda because it was one of the most prosperous countries for them. Given the nickname the Pearl of Africa by Sir Winston Churchill, Uganda was rich in cotton, rubber, tea and sugar, which the British used tons of. In order to work and own the farmlands and handle the trade industry at that time, the British essentially shipped in Indians. Because they disliked the black Africans so much, they refused to have them handle the items in which they consumed. Much of the country's wealth remained with the Indian population instead of with the native black African Ugandans. As a young man, Amin moved to the capital city where he did odd jobs and worked cleaning the British military barracks. With crushing racism, though, he was never permitted to hang out with the white British soldiers. Amin played rugby with British soldiers and was admired for his larger size and speed. Though he was never allowed to play in actual regulation games, Amin and other black Africans were allowed to become foot soldiers in the military. The soldiers were capped and unable to rise above a certain rank. The Ugandan soldiers were never allowed British citizenships after many applied for it. 1946, Amin became a member of the King's African Rifles of the British Colonial Army. Amin rose high in the ranks of the British military, something that no other black Ugandan soldier was able to do. Amin was flown to Scotland, where he was formally trained. There he fell in love with the country. Amin was the perfect soldier. His uniform kept clean and crisp, shoes always clean. He was powerful at commanding soldiers. He would berate them for having filthy shoes or marching out of step. 1951, he later went into boxing. His size and quickness amazed the British, who used insults often to describe Idi. He behaved as the perfect soldier in the eyes of the British. He knew how to work his way into their favor, which helped him rise through the ranks. Did you know? During his time in the army, Amin became the light heavyweight boxing champion of Uganda, a title he held for 9 years between 1951 and 1960. Source: History.com. The same thing was happening in Kenya at this time. The Indian population were the shop owners and wealthy citizens in Kenya. When a black Kenyan was unable to travel without a travel pass, the Indians were able to move freely within the country. The British thought of Amin as a big, idiot brute. The British officials always openly called him such names. The world considered him the same, and his entire life he was thought of as such. During this time, Amin learned to speak English. Once he had his first kill, he actually started to like the act. White historians continue to say that Idi made a fool of himself on the world stage. Not true. Amin said whatever he wanted to say. Once inviting the late Queen Elizabeth out for a wild night on the town in Kampala, Uganda's capital. Amin was a jokester and often used funny language which was inappropriate, but he loved to insult the British. He was a practical joker by all accounts, laughed to make others laugh. Amin also said that Hitler didn't kill enough Jews when he was in power. Idi Amin placed mostly Muslims from his ethnic group in charge of the top positions, though they made up such a small portion of the population. He often mistreated several tribes, killing and targeting them as well as anyone who wasn't Muslim. That is 91% of the population. Note, this is like the tweets of Uganda's current president Yoweri Museveni's son, Muhoozi has said, threatening Kenya, saying he could take over their capital city of Nairobi within 2 weeks via Twitter. It was said that Milton Obote led Uganda into independence. The British were under pressure from other nations to hand over power to the Ugandans. Even though Idi Amin had displayed some very cruel, bizarre behavior, the British were already planning on handing over independence to the country. So they, the Brits, decided to not punish him. They left him, and Obote decided to keep Amin close and placed him back into the position of the Ugandan army. 1970, Milton Obote had gotten tired of the looting of funds, excessive spending by Amin, so he decided he was going to fire him. Instead of firing him immediately, he left the country for an international trip. While Obote was gone, Idi Amin took over power of Uganda. Meanwhile, Idi Amin was said to have 8 wives and more than 50 children, probably more than 50, some with his mistresses. He later divorced 3 wives, 2 of whom mysteriously died within months of their divorce. "Get the fuck out of Uganda before I eat you." Idi Amin. Idi Amin was to have said this to the large Indian population that they had 24 hours to get out of Uganda before they were to be eaten. Some claim, Kenyans, he gave them what is the amount of the American currency of 25 cents. This led a large stream of Indians fleeing into Kenya and Tanzania. The British did relocate many Indians to Britain even though they hadn't wanted to do so. The current United Kingdom Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's grandparents come from this migration of East Africa. Kenya and Tanzania claim his grandparents as citizens, proclaiming Sunak as an African of Indian ethnicity. It was said some 40 to 50,000 Indians were evicted from the country under Amin. It is unknown how many of them fled before he told them to leave. Idi Amin on Hitler. Idi Amin when he was asked about Hitler. YouTube.com. However, after he expelled the Indians, he gave their businesses as well as farmland over to his supporters. These men had no idea how to work the fields, fix the machinery, or how to trade items. This plunged Uganda and Ugandans into extreme poverty. Uganda, Idi Amin, TVI, 1979. A YouTube video. Idi Amin. What was he actually like? YouTube video. Idi Amin said things like he was a cannibal and ate human flesh. Idi also was charged by the British troops to go into Kenya and find the location of the weapons from the captured Mau Mau group. Idi Amin made the men strip naked, placing their penises on the table. He then took out a machete, threatening to chop them off. The men confessed the locations of their weapons immediately. Idi Amin had a history of cutting off the genitals of men. He had often resorted to this type of brutality. He would kill men by clubbing them over the heads. He was a very brutal man. Amin often had his troops slaughtered. The longer he stayed in power, he stopped trusting anyone around him. The British no longer supported Amin. The more out of control his behavior became, as well as Israel, who had been supportive of Amin's violent behavior. Amin then turned to leaders in Iraq, Libya, and Saudi Arabia, as he was a practicing Muslim. Idi Amin led troops into Tanzania. In a battle Uganda lost as they were pushed back by the combined Tanzanian troops but also Ugandan troops who had fled into Tanzania over some years. Idi died in Saudi Arabia at 75 after a few attempts to take back power of Uganda, each of which failed. When he finally settled that he'd never rule over Uganda again, he remained in Saudi. The United States and Britain begged for Saudi Arabia to take him back after his second attempt to take over Uganda. He was not allowed to give an interview or speak about his time leading Uganda. He asked to die in Uganda, which was denied. He died, was buried in Saudi Arabia. Within them, those who fled the country into Tanzania were the current President Yoweri Museveni along with Milton Obote. Obote, who was forced out of power while on a trip to the Philippines, took sanctuary in Tanzania. After Idi Amin fled the country, Obote returned to rule Uganda at what some called a shady election. Milton Obote was very unliked by Ugandans because they thought the elections were rigged, as well as the fact Obote had a relationship with the Westerners. After 5 years, Yoweri Museveni took power in 1971. He's been in office for 37 years. Museveni has also been accused of much of the same behavior as Idi Amin. His son Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who is a general in his father's army, continues to the day 2023 to post immature and random tweets. Muhoozi continues to tweet incomprehensible, nonsense tweets. Most people now ignore his rambling rants. Muhoozi is known to have one wife, but that doesn't stop him from tweeting sexist, disgusting tweets towards other women. He often threatens other countries like the DR Congo and Kenya. At this current time, Muhoozi hasn't threatened Tanzania or their president Samia Suluhu. Thanks for reading. Please consider buying a coffee for Lacey's house, gender equality and children's rights as it tries to move international. Also, please consider buying a Medium membership for $5 a month or $50 a year. You can read unlimited stories from myself and hundreds of writers on Medium. TBA Bwoj 2023 all rights reserved.